Deep within each of us, there is a yearning to awaken our inner mystic. In this podcast, we explore topics related to metaphysics, including the law of attraction, spiritual awakening, consciousness, and ascension. We invite you to join us on a journey of awakening the inner mystic in order to unleash magic and miracles in your life.
Hi, welcome to the Mystic Mamas podcast. My name is Heather Gray, and I'm a Martha Beck Certified Life Coach. My mission is to help women who are losing themselves to being the perfect wife and mother get out of the Groundhog Day cycle so that they can get to know who they really are.
And hey, I'm Irene Schultz. I am a holistic healer and a certified Akashic Records practitioner. And I help to identify and heal the blocks that are holding you back and illuminate the path that the universe has intended for you to be on. And I do this by using a variety of intuitive holistic healing modalities and also accessing your Akashic Records.
You and I met because we are both very passionate about transformation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you and I met, and I was trained as a Martha Beck Certified Coach, and you read Finding Your Own North Star.
That's right.
And it really resonated with you and helped you along your path. And so you searched out a Martha Beck coach, and you found me.
Right. And little did I know my life would change that quickly.
Oh, and mine too. We've both been on this journey together ever since then. And our mission is to the journey of awakening and raising our consciousness. And, you know, like I said, we were both inspired by Martha Beck, and she talks about following your own inner compass. And so that's what Irene and I have learned how to do, is follow our own inner compass.
So one of the things that we found as we both started to listen to this inner compass is that we noticed that the universe started opening up to magic and miracles. So we started, both experiencing a lot of synchronicities, a lot of repeated symbols that we would see, and just a lot of manifesting things that, something that was in our minds would just suddenly appear. And it really kind of instilled a sense of wonder in us. So we wanted to join forces to help you explore your own inner mystic so that you can unleash this world of magic into your life.
Mm-hmm.
So today we decided to get our inspiration from a deck of oracle cards, and the deck is called the Wisdom of Avalon Oracle Card. They're developed by Colette Baron-Reid, who has amazing oracle cards, and she actually now also too has her own podcast and does weekly readings. And actually you can find a link to those down below, so if you're interested in getting these. I know that both Heather and I have these cards, and they are truly magical, and they're always speaking to us.
And they are very predictive.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And a lot of times Heather and I will actually pick the same cards, and we've found that there have been some synchronicities with that as well. So we asked the cards to speak to us and to give us a message that we wanted to share with all of you. We know the tone in recent times has been one of a lot of change, a lot of kind of a sense of like a dying of something, dying and grief, that we have lost this old way of living in light of this recent pandemic. And so we thought, what message can inspire us to dive deeper into what the universe wants us to do with all of this? So the card that we drew was the Bard. And I really didn't know what the Bard was. So I did a little bit of research, and I found out that in medieval Gaelic and British culture, he was a professional storyteller, verse maker, and poet. He was a music composer, an oral historian, and a genealogist. So basically, he was kind of a Renaissance figure of his time. And these characters would infuse art and the spoken word into the culture. One of the important roles that the bards had of their time is that they kept the stories of past cultures and their ancestors alive. And they would do this by bringing together communities, because back then, obviously, there were no radios, no TVs, no podcasts. So they would bring big groups of people together. The bards would lift people's spirits through through this music and this dance and this poetry and this storytelling. Another, key important aspect of the Bard is that it was really the only way of imparting knowledge from ancestors, since most people were illiterate. So back then, they didn't have the books that they could refer to. Most people couldn't read. And maybe if there were books, most people were not able to understand them. So it was the Bard's role to kind of pass these stories and these fairy tales and these myths from one generation to the next. And they really had the ability to bring these stories to life through their exquisite storytelling skills. When I Googled the Bard, the first thing that actually came up was William Shakespeare. And he was actually known as the Bard of Avon. And most people, obviously are familiar with Shakespeare. We all studied him in high school and maybe college. He was a bard because he was really a genius in his ability to write stories. And he really had this impassioned and lyrical skill that he infused into his stories. And there was also a lot of comic relief in his stories. There was a lot of satire and a lot of drama. And so he was really a key figure in his time in inspiring this poetry and drama. And he would do this by entertaining the masses in his theaters. So that was one thing that I found. And as I was exploring this, my daughter was curious, and she's 15, and she's like, Mom, bards are a key figure in Dungeons and Dragons. So she actually belongs to this Dungeons and Dragons class. One of the first characters that she played was the bard. Apparently bards are these skill-based characters that induce magical effects. After I did this research, I wanted to get deeper into what the Bard's message was for us, kind of dive a little bit deeper. And I do this by entering the Akashic Records. So what I did is I went into my Akashic Records and I asked the Bard to show up and give us a message. And the first thing that I got, I usually get an essence of someone when I see them in the Akashic Records. And I got that he was a very playful and mischievous character, and that he doesn't take life too seriously. And he is really showing up to kind of lift our mood and reawaken that inner child and take this seriousness that we have been sensing since back in March, when all this, pandemic situation just took over our whole country. And so that's what he's really here to do. Then he gave me some messages about things that he felt were important for us to know. The first message that he gave was that he's really wanting to have us build a community around something that we share a common passion and interest for. So whether this is something artful like poetry or literature or cooking or dancing or anything that, inspires you, or if it's just a common interest, he really wants us to build communities around that. I've kind of been exploring this, and every Sunday, I belong to this book club that some friends and I decided to start years ago. So we were always exploring these mystical texts and, having discussions about them. And there's a lot of media nowadays, or a lot of social media that really is geared towards this. So, there's apps for this. A lot of people are connecting through apps like Meetup, where they're getting together and they're sharing this common purpose. And, they're able to kind of share that passion. And this can really take on a life of its own. When people get together and share this passion, it can spread like wildfire into the culture. The second message that the Bard had for us is that he is asking us to activate the artist or the creative nature within us. Art really helps to awaken our souls, and it propels us into a higher state of consciousness. And, when I started on this journey of awakening, I didn't really see where art fit into all of this. And I think that's why the Bard is here, to make us understand that it's really his energy that kind of unleashes this inner child. And what do children do? They create this world of bliss through play and imagination. It's not until they get older where they're conditioned and programmed into always having to work and, having to do things that are structured, that we really shift from that childlike nature. And I find that when we often do engage in art, it's really kind of in a passive form. So we might go to an art museum or watch a musical, but are we really engaging actively with this art, or are we just really looking at it from an observer standpoint? Like, how often do we make time to put some paint on a brush and start creating something on a canvas? Or how often are we inspired to start singing out loud when a good music comes on? Heather, you had a story about that where you were in the grocery store. You want to share that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I just feel like we've really lost that connection to dance. To, when we lived in tribal societies, I'll get to my story in a second, but when we lived in tribal societies thousands of years ago, we would gather around the fire and we would dance and we would storytell. And that's how people bonded and connected and even connected to the divine. And then things changed. So I feel like we're really missing that. And in fact, whenever I go to Trader Joe's, they always play pretty good music at Trader Joe's, like something from the 80s or like disco from the 70s. So whenever I'm in Trader Joe's and Dancing Queen comes on or something like that, I just want to bust out and dance. And I'm looking around at everybody and I'm thinking, don't you all just want to get down to this music right now? And I think about the line to this poem. And the last line of the poem says, if we're not supposed to dance, why all this music? And let me read the whole poem because I just think it's good. The poem is by Gregory Orr, and it's called To Be Alive. To be alive, not just the carcass, but the spark. That's crudely put, but if we're not supposed to dance, why all this music? So I feel like, that's been conditioned out of us, just that joy of music. And it would be embarrassing at Trader Joe's to break out in dance, even though, I really want to. It's just, how can you resist Dancing Queen? And
right.
But that's just all been conditioned out of us. Music is everywhere, but we're not allowed to, we're allowed, but it would be frowned upon if you danced every time you got the urge. We really repress that a lot. And so I think our souls really miss that, the dancing. People will watch American Idol, or you think you can dance or whatever, and we watch it very passively. But I think that we are all meant to dance and sing on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So a remedy to that would just be to get in your car and belt out your favorite song or put on your favorite gangster rap song and dance around the house. That's what I do.
That would be quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a sight. That's why I only do that when I'm alone. I was reminded of one time we were over here and you organized a party and you had some friends over and we all got together and we got some drums and we sang this chant and it was just really, really cool to get together with a bunch of women and do that.
Yeah.
And I think get-togethers like that, that's what we're missing, to really bond and connect over that. And it really was magical.
It was. That's exactly the word that I was thinking. It just kind of created. And it's interesting that when moments like that are created, everything works out perfect. Like the whole night ends up being perfect. It's like you don't run into any glitches. And that's when the universe starts supporting you when that magic is created. It's like, you're on the right path, right? And so it's like you start to see all this other stuff unfold that just makes it into a perfect gathering or a perfect event. Yeah. So why do you think so many of us are struggling to embrace the artist within?
I really think it's been trained out of us. And we live in a culture that's very left brain. That means analytical, logical, mathematical, based on science and facts. And we've been trained that is above all what you're striving for. You want to be good at math. You want to be good at all those things. And art and the right brain things like
maybe intuition.
Like intuition and emotion and connection and that sense of community and expression and creativity. That's all right brain stuff. And up until this point in our society, for a really long time, that stuff has been, what's the word? Poo-pooed
it's downplayed.
Repressed.
Yeah, downplayed, repressed. Like, it's not important. It's indulgent, right?
Yeah, it's indulgent. Yeah. It's a bunch of fluff. Yeah, it can be considered unimportant or lazy. Like if you if you've got a bunch of stuff on your to-do list to do and you make time to sit down and finger paint, I mean, that can be considered just,
a waste of time.
A waste of time. And you're being lazy and you're not being productive and you're not getting stuff done. So there's something wrong with that. Yeah. And so in our culture, the left brain are the masculine principles, and the right brain, those are the feminine principles, the creativity, the wholeness, the emotion, and the left brain is the logical side. And there was oh my gosh, the other day I was talking to my youngest son, Carson. He's 8 years old, and we were watching this video that he had seen at school. It was about this fawn and this Great Dane dog that had become friends. And the Great Dane was like its mother. It ended up taking care of this little fawn. And Carson, while we were watching it, kept on asking me, Mommy, are you crying? Are you crying? And I said, oh, Carson, are you feeling sad? He said, I did at school. And I said, did you cry at school? He goes, no, because I'm a strong man. And that's
crazy.
That was like a gut punch because he did not get that message from me.
Oh, I know.
It's just pervasive in the culture that expressing your emotions is not acceptable.
Right. Especially for males.
Especially for men.
Yes.
So I think the repression of the right side of the brain and the feminine principles is even harder for men.
Yes.
Because we are allowed, it's more socially acceptable for us to show our emotions.
Right.
But not men.
Yeah.
And my 8-year-old has already picked up on that. And it just really breaks my heart because I have always encouraged him to express his emotions and to learn how to feel his emotions in his body. And so I've got some work to do. I guess I don't know how you escape that when it's just so pervasive in the culture.
It just needs to be a cultural shift, I think.
I do think that things are changing.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think we are headed towards the more feminine principles. Another reason we might repress that creative side is because of fear. Because when you do get in touch with your creativity, the right side of your brain, you're getting in touch with your emotions. And so there's this great quote that you found that I love. It says, art washes from the soul the dust of everyday life, which exposes us to our hidden emotions, which we fear.
I love that.
And I think that is perfect. Another thing I wanted to talk about is, that we live in a patriarchal society, which represents the left brain, the logical, the scientific. So a really great book to explore the difference between the left brain and the right brain would be Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight. And in that book, she talks about her journey of having a stroke. And she's a neuroscientist. So it was like she was studying this as it was going on. It's really interesting how she put it. So she talks about how her whole left brain went offline and the experience of what it was like just to be in your right brain.
So did she have a stroke in her left brain then? Is that what happened?
She had a stroke in her left brain and it was just on the left side. And so her whole left brain went offline. So then she knows what it feels like just to be totally right-brained. And of course, we need both because when she first had her stroke, she called somebody and the person that answered the phone sounded like a dog barking because when you're left...
I love that.
And when she went to dial, the numbers looked like squiggles, unrecognizable squiggles and symbols.
Yeah, that's the language part of your brain, right?
And
she
so
lost that.
We need that left
absolutely.
brain. So we need that masculine left brain side.
Yeah.
But we also need balance between the right and left. And she talks about being in her right brain and how it just felt like nirvana. She described it as nirvana and a state of total bliss where she didn't feel separate from anything else around her. And I mean, that's right in our minds right now. We have access to that. And what's happened is we're more wired to the left side, but we need to have a more of a balanced brain so that we can be connected to our bliss and the wordlessness and the oneness. Like her experience, and she learned there are so many lessons from that book, but she learned that she was very sensitive to people's energy. And in fact, she put a sign outside of her door that said, be mindful of your energy when you walk in the room, because she could really sense it. And then when her left brain critical voice came back in, she said she just curled up in a ball on her bed. It was just like daggers. That left brain, when her brain started coming back online, it was just like, because she had been used to being in bliss.
Yeah. That's interesting that inner critic is really that language left part of our brain, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah. And I want to read a quote from the book where she describes it in her words. She says, "My entire self-concept shifted as I no longer perceived myself as a solid, an entity with boundaries that separated me from other entities around me. My left hemisphere had been trained to perceive myself as a solid, separate from others. Now released from the restrictive circuitry, my right hemisphere relished in its attachment to the eternal flow. I was no longer isolated and alone. My soul was as big as the universe and frolicked with glee in a boundless sea."
Wow.
That sounds pretty amazing. And it sounds like a near-death experience is what it sounds like. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's very fascinating because I do agree that we completely, I mean, at least most of our culture is really geared towards that dominating of the left brain for sure. It's interesting how many gifts are in the right brain. So what are some ways do you think that we can really awaken this artist or this bard within? How do we do that?
Well, you and I have both, and I've read it in the past, and you and I are both reading it right now, The Artist's Way.
Mm-hmm. And that's
is a great way. The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And if you look below, you'll be able to see the link to that book.
Mm-hmm.
It is just an amazing book.
It's a life changer.
Yes.
For me, anyway.
And so she talks about 2 principles which will change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And one is the artist state. Okay. And can you discuss the artist state? You do a really good job of explaining how it works. Yeah.
So the artist state is something that is part of the Artist's Way, and it's something that is recommended that you do once weekly. It's basically you go on this date with yourself. So it's really a solo expedition to explore something that interests you. And so solo means no husband and kids in the car, no coffee with friends. It's really about being by yourself, having a date with yourself. And it doesn't really need to be overly artistic. You don't have to go out and paint or do pottery or anything like that. Think mischief more than mastery. And what artist dates are really meant to do is fire up the imagination and spark whimsy.
So just anything that lights you up.
Yeah. And it's funny because my very first artist date was I took myself to a pet store because I love pets. And it's getting back to that inner child. It's awakening that inner child. So, this particular pet store that I went to had animals that you can actually interact with. That birds that you can put on your fingers and put on your shoulder. They had ferrets, all kinds of animals. And I just had so much fun doing that. Like I was just giddy with excitement and happiness. And so you really don't have to spend a lot of time doing this because I know that we really want to, it's like finding the time to do things sometime. So why don't you talk about that?
And with the artist date, you have to put it in your schedule.
Yes.
Because, the artist date, that sounds great, I'll make an artist date. But if you never put it in your schedule, it's probably not going to happen.
Exactly.
So you have to set boundaries with your artist date. You have to say to your husband and kids or, your partner, on Tuesday for a couple hours, I'm taking this time for myself. I'm going by myself because I need to fill my bucket. I need to fill my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm carving out 2 hours and it's just going to be me.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to put up boundaries around that. And hopefully the people in your life will understand.
Yes, absolutely. Because it's definitely something that if you don't make that time for yourself, then you're not going to do it, right? Like, I mean, if you don't carve out that time and like you said, let the people around you know that this is my time.
Mm-hmm.
No kids coming along. You can't leave the husband in the car. It's something that you have to do for yourself. And it's really kind of discovering that, again, it's rediscovering that inner child within. And also just letting yourself indulge in something that you're passionate about, because we don't indulge ourselves in this culture. It's just seen as something that is unnecessary, as selfish. It's like we're programmed to have this like puritanical almost kind of sense of, it's bad to take care of yourself. It's seen almost like it's selfish, but it is so critical to our well-being.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think if people took the time to do things that light them up and fill their soul, really refuels you. It's like your fuel to keep you going. It's like that passion
Yes.
to keep you going, because if you ignore that for too long and you don't give to yourself, then you become just really flat and emotionless, and you're just kind of going through the motion like that Groundhog Day.
Yes.
And you can become kind of like a zombie.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's very much, I mean, I sense that a lot, that we just kind of go through the motions of everyday life and we get swept away by tasks and completing things. And so I agree with that, definitely.
Yes, because we've been trained that if we get all our stuff done, all of our to-do list done, then that's the end all be all, right? But the thing about the to-do list is that it never ends. It never freaking ends.
Does not. Mine is ongoing. And it took a lot of years to realize that it just never ends.
It never ends, and the laundry never ends.
It doesn't. It's just a constant bottomless pit, isn't it? So what was the second principle that you wanted to talk about in The Artist's Way?
The second principle is the morning pages. The morning pages is... if you do the morning pages every day, you really don't need a therapist. It
So
really
what
is
are the
therapy.
morning
The morning
pages?
pages.
Yeah.
Is what you do is when you first wake up, you write out 3 pages longhand of stream of consciousness of whatever comes to your mind. And there are no rules. You can write down anything you want. And if nothing comes to mind, you just write down blah, 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 blah. Or write down your to-do list or whatever's coming up. And it can be as weird as you want it to be, and it really helps if something emotional happened the day before, like my husband said something that upset me. Well, I can write it out in the morning pages, and you're literally getting that energy out of your mind and body and onto the page.
Yeah.
And it feels so much better, just like when you have a ton of things to do and you write down your to-do list. It just feels better to get it out on the page.
Yes.
And to be able to look at it. The only thing about the morning pages is you want to wait a long time before you go back and look at it. You don't want to sit there and read your morning pages all the time, because you're just reinforcing the kind of some negativity. So you want to write it, get as weird as you want to be, and then just move on.
I know. I find myself going on these rants. I mean, it's like my best friend is listening to me, and I go off on these rants when I'm mad at people or when I'm, really emotional about something. And it is amazing how just putting it on the paper really just kind of clears that energy out. It's kind of that principle we were talking about earlier about art washing from the soul, the dust of everyday life. I almost feel like the morning pages do that, right, Heather?
I feel like that too. And yesterday I did not do the morning pages, and I felt off all day because I've been pretty good about doing them lately. But I noticed that immediately when I didn't do them in the morning that, gosh, what is wrong with me? I just feel weird today. My energy was just off. I have no reason to feel this way, but I think it's because I did, when I was trained to be a life coach, we called it daily thought sanitation. Just cleaning out that daily gunk. And if you don't do it, it builds up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I know that you infuse that in with your coaching, don't you? Like when you do your group coaching programs, that you infuse that philosophy or that practice into your coaching, don't you?
Yeah. It's definitely a part of my program. I just think it's one of the most powerful tools and one of the easiest.
Absolutely.
It's so uncomplicated. You just need to carve out that time to do it.
And I have been dedicated to doing mine as well. What I find it helps me to do is not only help kind of release some of those emotions, but I really get some insights into like the subconscious mind. So you're supposed to do them right when you wake up. Right. So you have what's fresh in your mind from your dreams. And because otherwise, you'll forget your dreams later in the day. So I find myself writing out like the dreams that I have. And it's interesting is as that stream of consciousness comes out, it's like I start to really see the symbolism that's playing out behind the dreams that I wouldn't necessarily be able to analyze if I wasn't writing it out. So it's like something almost takes over me when I start this flow of writing, and it really gets me into a deeper place where I can explore some of those hidden emotions or problems and how to, sometimes even how to solve some of those problems. So it's such a powerful tool.
It is a powerful tool, and I use it for dreams too. And then I do an analysis technique after I'm done with the morning pages if it was a really powerful dream.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You've taken me there, Heather.
Yeah.
And that is amazing.
It is really cool. It's very revealing.
Yes.
I have noticed if I'm doing the morning pages on a consistent basis, it's like my dreams will become more vivid. I guess because I'm putting focus on my dreams in the morning. So it just becomes more vivid and easier to analyze.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I wanted to discuss is when I was reading The Artist's Way, one of the things that I discovered is that really when you tap into your creativity, you're actually tapping into this divine within that wants to manifest itself into the world. It's really a beautiful process. And there was this beautiful quote in The Artist's Way that I wanted to share, because I just think that it really captures this idea. So in the book, Julia Cameron says, the heart of creativity is an experience of the mystical union. The heart of the mystical union is an experience of creativity. Those who speak in spiritual terms routinely refer to God as the creator, but seldom see creator as the literal term for artist. I am suggesting you take the term creator quite literally. You are seeking to forge a creative alliance, artist to artist, with the great creator. Accepting this concept can greatly expand your creative possibilities. So I just love this. And again, we can choose the term creator. We can choose the word God. I like to, see it as the divine within, because really it's that divinity that lives within us all, that connects us all, that we're tapping into. And I think that that can be the heart of creativity, because it's like this will is coming through you to express. And it doesn't just have to be something that is necessarily artistic. The famous inventors of our world were also very mystical. Take, for example, Nikola Tesla. I watched a documentary about him, and it showed that he, from a very young child, had this connection to the divine within, and he would get visions where he would see some of these ideas about electricity and about all these different concepts that he was infusing into his inventions. He would just get them, he would just get these flashes of insight. And it was just really remarkable. And it's interesting that, a lot of other great inventors, when they were inventing their, whatever they were creating, that there were other people at the same time that were inventing them. Almost like we have this ability to have these radio signals that are reaching to this higher place that we're able to tap into. And a lot of times these ideas, it's like we're in this constant evolution, and we're ready to receive that information,
And those thoughts are in the air for whoever is ready to receive it.
Exactly. It's very fascinating. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. You don't necessarily have to agree with this, but to me, it makes a lot of sense. So it's just fascinating.
I wanted to share a quote from a book called The Science of Getting Rich, which, it's a very spiritual book, and it's actually very deep, even though the title sounds kind of servicey. But there's a lot of really cool stuff in this book. It's a really short book, and it's an old book. But in this book, he talks about he doesn't mention the word creativity, but this is exactly what this quote is talking about. And he calls the universe the formless stuff. It's like a formless intelligence. But anyway, here's what he says about the formless stuff. The formless stuff is intelligent. It is stuff which thinks. It is alive. It is impelled toward more life. It is the natural and an inherent impulse of life to seek to live more, and it is the natural nature of intelligence to enlarge itself, and of consciousness to seek to extend its boundaries and find fuller expression. The universe of forms has been made by formless living substance, throwing itself into form in order to express itself more fully. The universe is a great living presence, always inherently moving toward more life and fuller functioning. And I love that quote, and the way he describes it, I've never heard it described quite like that, but I think he's just talking about the natural flow or the natural impulse of the universe is towards creativity. So when you're repressing your creativity, you're fighting against the impulse of the universe, because that's why we're here.
I love that.
And we're always wanting to grow and change. And that's creative too.
Right.
Like on this journey of growing and changing. And that's the impulse of the universe. And when you fight it, it causes problems.
It does, right?
Yes.
You're repressing something that is natural.
Yeah.
Well, we really want to thank you for joining us today, our very first recording ever. And please join us next time as we further explore ways to tap into the world of miracles and magic by awakening the inner mystic. And you can do that by clicking on the link below. That would take you to our Facebook page. And then also, please like us and let your friends know about us. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.